Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
We're all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. John is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. We're not going to take any calls today, but I'll give you the telephone listen line so you can use it if you so choose. 605-477-3249. Captain John Regan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Hey, well, the Internet's down, so I am broadcasting via the telephone line. It's called POTS, P-O-T-S. Literally, that's the name, the shorthand, the abbreviation that telephone companies, providers use when they're talking about landlines, also known as POTS, which stands for Plain Old Telephone Service, the most reliable communication system in the world. Plain old telephone service, landlines, the kind of things that the GDP is saying, I don't need no stinking landline, I got a cell phone. You know, the ones that don't work all the time, kind of like the Internet. So, Captain John Regan, what do you have on today's blackboard for us?
I tell you, if you have to go to Plan B, I guess it's a couple of tin cans and a string.
You bet. You bet.
And I doubt the young people out there today even know that trick.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what they used to teach in science class. And by the way, I made the comment, and I still stand by it, that USA Prepares teaches things that you did not learn in school because your teachers weren't smart enough. And I mean it. So let's get right into it, Captain John Regan.
Well, it's been a bit of a down week for me. It kind of started at church Sunday, and as you know, one of my hot buttons is Christians ignoring what's going on, or American Christians in particular, what's going on with other Christians around the world. We have millions of Christians being persecuted, and tens of thousands of them being murdered a year. And I just took a look at certain points on during the service, and the first 45 minutes is what I call the entertainment section, where it's basically music with a little bit of prayer and scripture thrown in. And then by the time you add on the rest of the service, we had about 100 minutes of service, and then another 5 minutes that was announcements. But of that 100 minutes, which is 6,000 seconds, couldn't even give 10 seconds to say a little prayer for those persecuted Christians around the world. And it's not like this church doesn't know that. I guess it was over a year ago, I was asked to do one of the prayers during the service, and I brought that up, and the message even talked about persecuted Christians. So it's just one of those things where, if it's not happening in your backyard, you tend to forget about it. I also felt a bit frustrated because one of the things covered in those 5 minutes of announcements is the youth is having a bake sale to raise money for events this summer. Well, we've talked about health issues, and here we are as Christians being, largely ignorant of what's in those baked goods. You have flour, you have sugar. Quite often you'll have some form of vegetable oil, and all three of those are damaging to your health. So, here we are having, Christians damage other Christians. Fortunately, I guess it's out of ignorance, but the result ends up being the same. And then after being so frustrated by that on Sunday, I get up Monday, and one of the news items that came to me on Facebook is a friend of mine from a church that we had joined in 2005 and were at until we moved to Missouri in 2010, had passed away. Like me, this guy is a white male Christian veteran, and while it wasn't unexpected, he'd been in very poor health and been in a care facility for a couple of months here. It's still the loss happens, and of course it's human nature. People we know affect you more than people you don't, which gets back to my complaint about caring about those persecuted Christians. And it was also around this time of year, 10 years ago, when I found out that I was not going to be hired for the job I'd been doing for the past 2 years. And in fact, out of all the people in the department, almost everybody got hired. The notable exceptions were the two of us data analysts, because they felt like, we can just plug other people in there. We were just the only two in the company. And this is an electric company that the company had just put in a new mobile support system, and we were the only two people in the company that knew how data went back and forth between that system and the company's mainframe. They did ask if I'd stick around for 2 or 3 months to train my replacement, considering that I didn't have anything lined up because I thought I was going to be hired for my position. I agreed to that, and it was perhaps a mistake on their part, because by time I had finished training that person, they couldn't get rid of me at that point. It was a mass layoff, and they can't let people go individually. So at that point, I was there through the end of the year, and that allowed me to have a paycheck, which was nice. That was the last series of paychecks I've ever had. And it was that summer that I had enrolled in the Master of Science in Finance program, which is the MS that's in the alphabet soup behind my name on my book. And that has caused me to look back over the last 10 years. That formal education plus all my individual research, most of which I've done my best to talk about on USA Prepares, things in finance, technology, health, and all the other general things that are going on out there. All of that's consumed about 30,000 hours of my life. And that's a big chunk. And I was looking at, what have I gotten out of that? And because of this education, it makes it tough for me just to have a conversation with most people. And if you consider that if only the top 1% of what I've learned is really critical information that everybody should know about, so they can make good decisions for their lives, that's 300 hours worth of information. To get that across inside of a year would require 6 hours a week. And that's something that people don't have. In fact, I was reading an article recently that people only have 4 hours of free time a week. So the average person wouldn't even have enough free time to get that. And to go even further, I think, maybe 10% could be considered really important information. Might not be critical, but without that knowledge, you can't make decisions as well as you could have otherwise. 10% of that would be 3,000 hours. And to get that information across would require about a year and a half of 40-hour weeks. And that is something that's just not possible. So it's been an interesting 10 years, and you might seem like a little down this week, and probably so. Next week I got a better anniversary coming. I'm less than a week away from our wedding anniversary. Becky became my wife nearly 27 years ago, and that 27 years has really been a honeymoon. It's been a blessing having her in my life, and I really don't know what my life would be like without her. But what I'm going to try and do during the rest of our time together today is go over some of these things that I've learned and try and pull out some of the important things and try to wrap it up with the best advice I can give at this point. Vincent?
I've got a question, John. You mentioned the bake sale at the church, and you talked about flour, sugar, vegetable oil. Don't forget the food colors that are added to make it look really, really delicious, especially red. Plenty of red. Red dye 40, right? Yeah, and blue, And when we come back, let's talk about the things you've learned. Captain John Regan. Captain John Regan's with us, and we're both on the telephone because the internet's down at my location in the Midwest. And we just called the telephone company, and they expect to have it back up in about 6 hours. 6 hours. So, yeah, and it's a regular thing. But I just want to tell you, every time this happens, I get on the telephone and I call them and I say, well, I'm paying for something you're not delivering. And they usually give me about a third of a month's credit. And I suggest you do that too. Anytime, if your internet, television, satellite, whatever it is, service is down, call them up, make a pest of yourself, demand not just one day, demand like a couple of weeks worth of credit. And if you keep doing that, maybe they'll decide to replace equipment that is marginal with equipment that actually works. Captain John Regan, you talked about 30,000 hours of study, and I believe that you said it's difficult to talk to most people. Did I hear that right?
Yes, because even people that pay attention to some of the things that go on, there's just so much, and in today's environment, it's even tougher because of the hostility, and we tend to talk about it in terms of censorship of the right or censorship of Christians, and it's even more than that. You can look at the vaccine debate. No dissent is allowed. If your opinion doesn't match what the powers that be demand, you're censored as well. And there's a lot of people that are health-oriented that do not believe in vaccines that are not, conservatives or Christians. And if you disagree, what happens now is you're not allowed on social media. In some cases, you even get your bank account closed. The difference here in America and China, in China, all this is done by the state with a social credit score. Here in America, it's done by corporations with very vague terms and conditions. And no matter whether it's here or there, you don't have very much recourse when it happens. And it's just so sad to see what's going on. But I just don't know, how do you have a conversation with people when they don't understand things? And even beyond that, you look at just the work I've done with our financial condition. This is something it's not an opinion. It's math. It's finance. It's something that can be shown. About the only debate in there is what's the timing, because you don't know exactly how the economy goes, but it doesn't matter as far as the end result. You can't escape the end result. And I happen to look up, the delusion being a mental illness. And in the definition, it's, people deny the reality even when presented with the facts. And to me, that seems like a great way of describing what's going on, especially with these leftists, not only the ones in power, but the stupid voters that vote for them. They, even if you sit down with them and show them where this is going, they deny it. And from what I can tell, if you were in the profession, you could use that as a diagnosis of mental illness. And unfortunately today, we've got a situation where the inmates are in charge of the asylum. And even if they weren't, what do we do? Well, we don't have the institutions like we had in the 60s where we could, keep these people away from society and keep from doing damage.
You're absolutely right, John. And my term for that for months has been GDP, generally dumb public. We'll be right back. So, Captain John, this week, Mrs. Finelli and I had our annual Medicare health checkup with our internist. And the internist knows us quite well. And just before the meeting with the doctor, you have a meeting with the nurse, and they ask you questions. And the nurse will say, and these are Medicare questions, questions like, have you fallen recently? Do you have any handrails in your home? Do you have difficulty hearing? Are you lonely? And are you lonely? It is lonely, John. It is lonely because we are surrounded by the GDP. So many people know so little about so much. It's staggering. Very good point that you brought up.
And I'll be getting into how we got to that point, and may surprise you a bit of what happened in the past that led us to that. Just want to make a quick side trip here. We're experiencing, I guess, severe global warming here in Dallas. This time of year, normally the high is around 82 degrees. Today, they're expecting 59. And if things go according to forecast, today we will break a record for the lowest high on this date. Actually have the heat on.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly here in Missouri, too. It really is. Yeah, please continue.
Well, a lot of times when I'm talking to people, I'll tell them I have a very bad case of Ecclesiastes, and if you've not read that book in the Bible recently, I I highly recommend it. I'm doing it about once a month now, and I'll choose different versions. Some versions, the primary word translates to meaningless. In most of the translations, it's everything is vanity. And I've mostly been reading the one where everything is meaningless. And that kind of relates to, these 30,000 hours and the message of Ecclesiastes. What benefit came out of those 30,000 hours? Certainly it didn't help me financially. Neither of my graduate degrees has earned me one interview, much less an additional dollar of income. All the efforts, writing a book, speaking at conferences, yes, I've brought in a little bit of money. However, the work I do, there's costs involved. You got the hosting, you've got internet, you've got so many things behind the scenes, and even when you do a lot of the work yourself, it doesn't come for free. So I've made less than nothing for my efforts over the last 10 years. I look at spiritually, I don't have any evidence that I've helped one person in their walk with Christ. I am frustrated in my life because I now recognize where we are in the state of modern Christianity, and I have problems trying to find an outlet to do things the way I read in the Bible. And I'll get into that a little bit more later when I talk about deceived Christians. And then there's the physical, ordinary, day-to-day side of things. And again, I've had no evidence that I've helped one person in preparing for the trying times ahead. And, that's been, our effort for, several years now, trying to get people ready, because regardless of what of all the possible things coming, definitely the financial is something that will, and we're getting into the end game of that. So I guess it was, I can't put an exact date, but 2007, 2008, I was still talking to people about how we need to find or create a community to get ready for what's coming. I guess the EMP report had come out around then. I understood how bad a grid down situation was, and I thought that in preparing for that, which is the worst case, that you'd be ready for pretty much anything that comes. And because of what I've learned in that 30,000 hours, I realized the futility in that. And perhaps that's the biggest benefit that I've received out of those hours. Had I not learned what I've learned, gone through these experiences, I would still probably want to pursue being able to have that lifestyle. And even the Amish, and I know you've had contact with them as well, they have the best skill set, and to do so in a community setting, I don't know any group that matches them for that. But even the Amish are dependent on the supply chain. If you look at the technology in the houses, kerosene is a big deal. There's so many other things they have to buy off the economy. And in some cases, I knew this one Amish house, the water heater was fueled by wood pellets. If the supply chain's gone, so is their water heater as well. Now, it's possible that with their skills that they could overcome that supply chain problem. But, what we've learned from the late Matt Stein, when that grid goes down, nuclear power plants will end up going critical. It's just the way they were designed. They're dependent on the power grid in order to keep the cores cooled. And when you have a large-scale grid down, and it doesn't matter whether, that's from a weapon or from the sun, he talked about how that would result in the equivalent of 400 Chernobyls. And if you haven't heard that, you can still find interviews that he's done online. If you put in Matt Stein, 400 Chernobyls. One of the realizations that I've come to is human nature is such that little, if any, action happens before an event occurs. At the same time, reality is such that once, let's take an example of being in a car, once an accident, the event starts, it's too late to put on your seatbelt or prepare for that event. And where I used to look at how to be perpetually self-sufficient, I now believe it's at least prudent to be ready for a disruption of 2 to 3 months. Those are very severe things that don't happen frequently. Hurricanes, tornadoes. There in the Ozarks, you had that ice storm in 2007. Some people were without power 2 or 3 months. But beyond that, if it's a true grid down situation for the country, it is going to be nearly impossible to just feed yourself, and that's if you can live through the radiation. And with our modern society, we're kept so busy and have so many distractions. And we've already talked about how really important issues are ignored or neglected. Schools do a poor job of education, and part of that is because I have to look, but I think it was early 19th century, the Prussian education model was brought to America. And what that education model does is instill loyalty to the state. And I guess to kind of summarize what it does is it instills teamism. And we see that in many ways, using our sports. We have, teamism with our schools. We have teamism with our states. We have Team Republican, Team Democrat. And it's very hard to get people out of that mindset once they are indoctrinated to it. And as a result, we have a populace that is mathematically illiterate. And that gets important because we're also financially illiterate. And I include people that have degrees in finance in that category, because even though they can run a financial calculator or put formulas into Excel and have some kind of modeling experience, some better, some worse, they lack the understanding of what's going on overall, and thus are no better off than the people that don't have that knowledge. People are historically illiterate, and that's where I've really come to appreciate, the American Minute with that's Federer's site, and how he points out, how things were in America when America was created. it was a Christian nation with tolerance for other Christian denominations. And now in America, being a Christian is one of the most hated positions to be in.
Well, I've got a lot of comments about what you've just said. I'll make them on the other side. Captain John Regan's with us, the financialstateoftheunion.com. Captain John Regan's with us, the financialstateoftheunion.com. Quite a sobering broadcast. Captain John Regan, I believe I heard you say that in the last 10 years you made next to nothing despite all your research efforts, hard work, study, and so forth, writing. Well, I've got to tell you, I'm right there with you. Making next to nothing or less than nothing means you've lost money. And I'm right there with you. So with all the meetups, the expos, the largest expos in the country, the in-person seminars that I travel to speak, radio, all that, less than nothing. Same thing. Same thing. And I'm frustrated. I am annoyed with the GDP, the generally dumb public. People are too lazy to learn, protect themselves, improve their health. I've had it with them. I have no interest whatsoever in helping anyone who is not interested in helping himself. I have no interest in helping anyone who is not interested in helping themselves. And you're right. It's futile. It is futile. I found some land. I found 640 acres near us, and I thought, wow, I think people would like to buy 2, 5, 10, 20-acre pieces of that. We could make it happen for about $1,500 an acre. It had everything you could possibly want. It had trees, rolling areas, grass, one way in, one way out, magnificent property for $1,500 an acre. That's what I could sell it for. And I only got maybe, at the most, 10 people who were interested. It had infrastructure. All the infrastructure was underground. No power lines. All the infrastructure was underground. And I was talking about having a village center, village gardens, village water, village defense, village education, village camaraderie. I mean, the coolest thing I could imagine. And we couldn't pull it off because there were so few who were interested. Now it has been cut over. It has been destroyed. So that's over. So I've got a question for you, a little outside what you were probably planning to speak about. John, you and I have been working together for years, and we've been trying to wake people up. We've been trying to get them to realize what's going to happen, how precarious society is perched. How many people do you think you've actually impacted, you yourself have impacted, in terms of actually really being prepared for what's coming? How many people do you think that might be?
As far as I can tell, 0.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Rich Shealy said, hey, Vin, he called me up probably over a year ago. He said, hey, Vin, let's put it out there that we want to teach preparedness and have people come to a preparedness school. And can you get somebody ready who will take down all the names and numbers of all the people who are interested so we can call them back? Can we build a system where we can make sure we keep all their phone numbers, for our use, to let them know about the meetings, the classes, the seminars? And I said, in so many words, Rich, it's not necessary to even think about that. No one's going to be interested. And that's pretty much what happened. Hardly anyone was interested. They want to come to my farm. They want to come to the Finelli family farm to check it out, but that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not doing that anymore. We are done. We are done spending money. I was asked to spend $500 a month to keep our broadcast on the satellite. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I spend $500? That really is hard. It's hard-earned around here. $500 is nothing to sneeze at in my world. And to me, $500 buys a car. Okay, literally, I'm not exaggerating. And I'm not willing to spend that money to help people who won't help themselves. I will not do it. We'll be right back with Captain John Regan right after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Does it sound selfish? Oh, I'm sorry if it does. But it's the truth. It's the truth. And what you said about the Amish, that's absolutely true as well. They use steel pipe, they use well pumps, windows, and they buy their sawmills. They buy them. They don't make them. They can't make them. So if you think the Amish are the answer, you're mistaken, class. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Class, USA Prepares is the most unusual faculty in radio. Exceptional in every respect. Smarter than every broadcast I know of. In information that you need to know. Most radio types call themselves talk show hosts. And that's exactly what they are. They are talk show hosts. We don't talk about it. We live it. We do it. That's who we are. We're not the same. We are not talk show hosts. And when I say that USA Prepares is the most unusual faculty and smarter than every broadcast I know of, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about your faculty. Your faculty is the best and the brightest I know of. I'm very serious about that. You can stack us up with any broadcast that you can think of, and I believe we will come out on top. Now, I'm not talking about comparing USA Prepares as a broadcast with a radio network. Radio network's much larger than we are. A radio network would be a collection of broadcasts. I'm just talking about USA Prepares as a program compared to any other program, including Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Michael Medved. Compare us to any of them. And where do you get more general information about what you need to know? Truth. Where? Nowhere. And I really mean that. Captain John, you and I and Rich Shealy, Joey, Guineith, Norm, Rick, and a host of others have all come to the same conclusions. And it's not like we had a meeting where we sat around somebody's kitchen table or living room or on a conference call and said, what do you think? Wow, we all agree. We have come to these conclusions independently, but the same conclusions. We believe that our efforts, we're making the effort, and we're trying to figure out why. Why? Why are we spending our time trying to educate people who don't understand how important it is for them to do things to protect their own families, to protect their own health? Why? Why? I don't get it. I really don't get it, except for the fact that you said human nature. It's human nature. And I think there is an equation there. Human nature equals laziness. Human nature equals laziness. And that's what I see. Captain John Regan, I see people traveling. They will get in their car and they will travel, I don't know, let's say 30 miles in flip-flops. And then they'll get out and they think that they're all set. They have no idea that if they have a flat tire and they have to walk a mile, they can't, because they can't walk in flip-flops. Flip-flops won't last a mile, but yet that's what they have on their feet. They'll go to the mall in flip-flops where you can pick up all kinds of diseases through your feet. The GDP, that's what they do. They don't think. But yet they vote. And they vote for people who abuse us. Captain John Regan, you're absolutely right. What did you have? What did you think about when I talked about? It's lonely. It's lonely being informed, because you can't talk to other people. They think you're nuts.
Yeah, even at church, and this kind of ties into the next section I was going to talk about. We have Christians that are biblically illiterate. And I've also come across how the church really lost its way, and this gets into the James 4:4, talking about how being friends with the world is being enemies with God. And that became institutionalized back in the 19th century. I've talked about on air how Billy Sunday declared in 1914 that we really needed a revival because our churches had become third-rate entertainment centers. And I've also said that if he were here today, I think he'd say they've become first-rate entertainment centers. And you know, that's really a sad commentary on itself. To possibly relate this to where more people might understand the situation, I think a lot of people have had either direct or indirect experience with somebody that's had a drug or alcohol problem. And when you're dealing with an alcoholic, until they realize they have a problem and want to be helped, there's nothing you can do for them. And that's pretty much true from what I see of deceived Christians. I don't know how to get through to them. I guess some of the best advice I could give there is, first off, read your Bible. And since most people have a smartphone, a good way of doing that, Benham Brothers has an app. And you can go into the daily Bible study, and there's a play button, and it'll narrate that day's readings. Yeah, and that's actually my preferred way for getting the daily Bible study. There's lots of resources online. It used to be you had to buy a program and install it on your computer to do any kind of Bible study. One of the sites is BibleGateway.com, and you can pull up and read all kinds of different translations, because the Bible wasn't written in English, and even if it was, the English language has changed over the years. And being able to use different translations, you can get a better idea of what's being talked about. Now, it wasn't my intention, but I've come across many of the milestones on how things got so screwed up. And one of these, I have to go back to Isaac Newton. He was well known as a scientist. He was also a devout Christian, but he also had one foot in alchemy. So he didn't apparently understand that's not where Christians are supposed to be dabbling. And in his science, he developed different things, but including calculus, which is the foundation for many of the things that were to come. And I've made the comment, too, that I don't have time to try and flesh this out today. Science and technology are the modern words for sorcery and witchcraft. A little after Newton's time, in France, there was a machine invented in 1751. It was a machine that made everything. Basically, it was a metal lathe. And that's where things started changing. Up until that point, pretty much everything was energy-wise driven by animals, whether in human form or the four-legged form. After 1751, these machines were developed, which allowed production to increase, which also led into the communist revolution, because the people that were able to make these machines made more money, and the people that weren't able to we're still living on the old standard, and that's even true today. In my researching the Great Depression, I came across the term the lost generation. And these were 17 years right before the 20th century. And I went and read on that, and lost is actually in the religious context. People became lost, and this was a time where you now have that machine that made machines combined with electricity and oil, the beginnings of it, that would power those machines. And that allowed an increase in standard of living and a turning on your back on the old ways. And boy, we could probably spend hours just talking about what all that has led to. You add on the addition of logic gates, which started off with relays and transitioned to transistors, and those have now become integrated circuits that power all of the electronic devices that we are now dealing with today. So as we traveled down that path, we became more and more worldly. And our churches today don't even see the problems in themselves. If you read how the original churches were 2,000 years ago, these people turned their back on the world to come together. And there were far fewer distractions back then than we have today. And because we don't do that, we try to make up for it with government, Social Security, Medicare, all these things that have bankrupted us. And I guess at this point I'll stop. The next section is the challenges that we're facing today, and I'll let you comment on where we are.
John, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. There's a James River Assembly of God, praise the Lord, entertainment center in just outside of Springfield, Missouri, 3,500-seat theater, huge screen, so you can all see the band on stage. Am I kidding? I'm not kidding. Churches are businesses. Not only are they businesses, they are corporations. Churches are corporations, 501c3s. We'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with us. John, you're talking about reading your Bible. And, Rich Shealy has asked me, why don't people do what we do? And I always say it the same way. It's too hard. It's too hard to start your garden. It's too hard to change your oil. It's too hard to learn about whatever that particular topic is that is currently in front of you. It's too hard. So people take the easy way out. And most people don't read. They flat out don't read. I can buy books, hardcover books, that were $50 at one time for $1. I can buy softcover books for 25 cents a piece. They're plentiful. Why? Because no one wants them. No one wants to go through the effort of turning the pages. It's too hard. I was in a waiting room this week. There is a large waiting room. Just to give you a relative idea of how big this waiting room is, this was for a doctor's appointment, a Medicare doctor's appointment for Mrs. Finelli and me. There are 4 elevators to get to this room. The building is 5 stories. 5 stories to low building in Springfield. It's a hospital. 4 elevators, okay, to get to 5 floors. 4 separate elevators to get to 5 floors. Okay? And in this waiting room, I looked around. And I observed things. That's just one of the things that I do, just to get a handle on what's happening. Not one person, not one single person was reading anything. Not one person. And yet there are plenty of magazines available, including National Geographic. Well, actually, there was one person reading a National Geographic, and that was me. And by the way, John, when you and I were of age to work in corporate America, they used to observe the candidates in the waiting room. And they would have magazines out there for your viewing pleasure if you chose to read them. They would have magazines like People and Us, and, magazines of trashy nature. And then they would have some magazines like intellectual types. And what they would do, literally, is they would have the secretary, they didn't have cameras back then, but they would have the secretary take note of what you happened to be reading. And that impacted your interview performance. So if you read something trashy, they didn't think as much of you as if you read something like the Wall Street Journal that might have been there, or the New York Times back then. Do you remember those days, John?
Yeah, and I remember an interview that I was sitting there and waiting, and they had the company annual report there, and that's what I was reading.
Well, I had already read that before I went to the interview. That was not available when I worked for a Fortune 100 company. But when they did ask me why I wanted to work there, I was able to quote from the annual report and name the corporate officers and the chairman of the board and the CEO. And that shocked them. So, yeah, John, what we're finding out is that the faculty of USA Prepares, a lot of the things that we didn't know about each other, like what you just mentioned. I didn't know that you had that same experience, so close to my experience, but we've reacted in the same way. So we seem to ferret out the truth the same way. We have these common threads of what we believe the truth is, and it's different from the GDP. Now, do you think, just as a slight tangent, do you think I was off base in any way, shape, or form when I mentioned that the faculty of USA Prepares is brighter than any other broadcast faculty in general information that you need to know?
And I think that's just a fact.
I said it because I believe it's a fact as well. And class, if you have never had the pleasure, and most of you have not, of being in the same room with a Norm, a John, a Rick, a Rich, a Guineith. Now, I have not been in a room with Guineith, but she is really, really bright. Or Matt Stein. I mean, some of the get-togethers we've had here at the farm are unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Any quick comments before we go to break?
No, just pick up and try and get to the rest of my points as quickly as possible.
Okay, Captain John Regan, and I'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with us, and just as a short detour, the tariffs on the substandard products from the Chi-Coms has more than doubled last night to 25%. If you need it, you might want to buy it right now, because Monday it will be increased in price. Those are my thoughts. John, please continue.
There's so many challenges we're facing, and I've talked about probably all of these. Most often it's been the financial side. I won't talk about the overall. It's as bad as ever, and then some. What we're going to see over the last few cycles, federal debt has been doubling about every 8 years. We've had historically low interest rates that are now rising again. And what we're looking at with the debt's going to continue to increase. I also expect interest rates to rise, especially as people become more aware that they may not get their money back, which would drive the interest rate up all by itself. But at our current trajectory, we're looking like, mid next decade, 2024, 2025, that we would reach the point where the government would have to borrow money just to pay interest on the debt. Nothing for, the welfare programs, nothing for defense. Social Security would be cut down to whatever they bring in from Social Security taxes. It would be quite ugly, or will be quite ugly. There's not enough resources for them to tax or confiscate to make up the difference. And regardless of who is elected, and I hope it will be Trump again, otherwise things will get worse faster. During this next term, we're going to see that accelerate, because as the interest takes more and more of the tax income, then the choices are is to cut programs or to borrow more. And given the way politicians have acted in the past, nobody's willing to cut any benefit, so they'll borrow more, which will just accelerate this process. And we don't have to get to that end point for things to get bad. So, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be interesting. Demographically is a problem even worse than the financial. Most countries, there's just a handful that are above replacement rate, and I think all of those are Muslim countries. And all the models you see on the financial projections are based on, unlimited growth. And the growth rate is over. It's now declining. We also have the problem of the loss of the elders, not that their wisdom's being listened to, but at least as a voter bloc, you've had the baby boomers be a large enough voting bloc to keep things at least somewhat balanced. This is the last election coming up in 2020 that they're going to have that big part, because they're dying off now. So we have about 4 years to change the hearts and minds of those young who think socialism's a better way, not realizing what they've been experiencing is much closer to socialism than capitalism. And they are likely to vote in some very horrific things. I don't expect us to be able to change their hearts and minds because of reasons we've talked about before, but that is what we're facing. Resources are going to get interesting, especially with all the mandates of electric vehicles. There's a lot of materials that are already in short supply that they don't know where they're going to get replacements for. And in the electric world, while lithium is fairly plentiful, they would have to ramp up mining, but that's not the only thing that's needed. Material like cobalt, which is critical for batteries, is in short supply and not necessarily in any kind of stable country. Even the energy we've been used to has problems. It's not that we are running out of oil, but we're running out of easy-to-get-to oil. At the beginning of the 20th century, it would cost a barrel of oil to get 100 barrels out of the ground, and that has gone up considerably. And when you get to the point where it takes a barrel of oil to get a barrel of oil, you just need to give up because you're just spinning your wheels. So much is going on with the environment. We've talked about all kinds of toxins, including radiation. Space weather is a big one. I've talked about this a little bit before, and you can find this on the Suspicious Observers YouTube channel. I did a series where, because of our decreased magnetic field, more cosmic rays are getting in. Because of the sun going into its minimum, more cosmic rays are coming in from outside our solar system. And just to have a trifecta there, our solar system is moving out of the magnetic cloud into a void in space. And that magnetic cloud has protected us from cosmic rays from elsewhere in our galaxy. And cosmic rays have a direct impact on our weather and our health. So that is going to get more and more interesting as time progresses. And then what I discovered in January, I'd never heard the term before, micronova. This took over 20 videos on the Suspicious Observers channel to cover. And that's a cyclical event that explains a lot of what happened in the past. Think about the Carrington event on steroids. Very, very damaging. Talked a lot about health, and this is a big thing with the upcoming election. They want Medicare for all, and we can't even begin to have a discussion to fix our health problems until it becomes about health rather than costs. And the source of most of our ills is chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is a lifestyle problem. You can't fix it with drugs. And it's a number of factors. I've talked about most of these: processed foods, sugar, especially fructose, omega-6 oils from seeds, your vegetable oil, canola, corn, etc., toxins in the environment, glyphosate, chlorine and its byproducts, fluoride. I wish we really had time to get into the microbiome, and they happen to be in the middle of doing that series again online. If you go to interconnectedseries.com, let me just double check that. Yep, interconnectedseries.com. You can still register. Right now, episode 3 is live. Episode 4 goes live tonight. And probably next weekend, they will have a replay weekend where you can get other that you've missed. In total, there's 9 episodes. Takes about 12 hours. It is outstanding. They interview 70 experts in the field, and the microbiome in your gut is responsible for so much of your health, and it's being destroyed with antibiotics, with some of those toxins we talked about, our changes in food where we no longer get the fiber, which feeds the bacteria, and we no longer eat fermented foods like we used to, because that was the primary means of preserving foods, and the beneficial bacteria would help replenish what we lost. Also contributing to inflammation is stress, which we have from our modern life, lack of sleep, lack of sunlight, lack of movement, and then just ordinary anxiety about money, relationships, and we could go on and on. So that is, as quickly as I can go through the list on a lot of the challenges. We're also losing, what I would call the American way. Talked about how Bill Federer gets into, more about the founding of our country than I ever learned in my time in school, and I think education's gotten worse since. We learned about the Constitution and the Declaration, and our country was founded on these God-given rights. And we have so many enemies of God in positions of power. And if we do not have God-given rights, then all we have are privileges that are granted by those that lord over us. When the country was founded, what was so unique about it is that Christians were tolerant of other Christians. And they the whole thing about the First Amendment preventing Congress recognizing the institution was to keep America from having a state religion, not what it has come to. And I'll pause there.
Captain John Regan, you and I have been broadcasting for many, many years. This is your most important broadcast ever. Captain John, here are a couple takeaways from today's broadcast, exclamation points. So, inflation is going to eat us alive. Here's an example. A few years ago, I used to be able to buy antifreeze for vehicles for $6.99 full strength per gallon. Last night, Xerox, a G05 antifreeze, is $22 a gallon with tax. In our near future, I believe that we will be plagued with property theft. Your local city and county corporations will be selling your property on the courthouse steps. I also believe that it's now becoming more widely known that radioactivity, man-made radioactivity, has been found at the bottom of the ocean's deepest depths, the Mariana Trench. And, John, can you provide us with a link to your broadcast notes? I don't have the Internet up and running yet. I won't for several more hours. Can you tell us where we can find your notes, please?
Yes, it's on my website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. I have moved the news tab to be the home page, so you don't have to even click on the news tab anymore. This post is called 30,000 Hours, and I'm going to also use this to annoy my Facebook friends. We've managed to cover most of it. There's a few things we didn't get to, but then just so we don't run out of time here, Ecclesiastes in some ways is kind of a downer because if you understand the wisdom in there, you realize that whatever you do, ultimately it's meaningless. But it does give some takeaways. It says to enjoy your wife, and like I said earlier, I am so blessed in that department. Enjoy what you have and do your best to do what's pleasing to God. And it's that latter that I'm finding so difficult because of the state of our churches. My plans from here on out is to get out of debt as quickly as can, which will probably take a few years, and basically retire to Belize and work on our health and just touch people on an individual basis at that point and hope that I can turn a few lives around. Vincent?
So, John, I'd love to ask you, I have gone Galt, John Galt, as in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I've pulled away from society in many, many respects. I am not going to feed the engine of society that is detrimental to all of us. I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to let any more of my innovations and designs be stolen. I'm not going to let any more of my work be used by other people for their credit. I've had it with people stealing my ideas for their own gain. I'm talking about greedy people who are careless. I'm not doing it anymore. I've even stopped writing my book because I'm not willing to share my 67 years of experience with detractors. I will not let it get in their hands. If they want to do it, they can learn it the way I did, the hard way. John, as a man of faith, do you think that what I've said is sacrilegious or against our God?
I don't think so, and it's like I say, we've turned so far away from what the Bible teaches us, and our churches are just nothing more than meeting places. And, well, you know, how many people do even know their names at church anymore? We should be living together, helping each other.
We don't know our neighbors. We don't talk to our neighbors. And I went to a funeral website where people posted their comments, and it was absolutely outrageous. So sorry to hear of your loss. You know, really can't even say a complete sentence. Absolutely an outrage what has happened to humanity. Captain John Regan, I really appreciate your friendship. I really appreciate what you said today. And as I said, I believe this is the most important broadcast you have ever done with me. Thank you so much.